Hi, I'm Paul Carroll. I'm the editor-in-chief at Insurance Thought Leadership. I am joined today by one of my favorite correspondents over the last year and a half, although we have yet to meet face-to-face, James Maudslay, who is the global head of insurance at Equinix, which does, and you have 220, 230, something like that, sites around the world that basically connects people to each other and the cloud and are sort of the infrastructure for an awful lot of what happens in insurance. So the way I look at it, you basically get to see everything and everybody, and therefore are omniscient and will enlighten us today on some things. You did a panel that I thought was fascinating at the recent Global Insurance Forum put on by the International Insurance Society, which I encourage people to go watch. But we're going to hit some of those highlights today and explore a few other things in the next 20 minutes or so. So welcome, James.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me along. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Maybe the place to start is with a question that I see circulating among the readers at ITL, which is sort of cloud, not cloud, hybrid. How does that all shake out? How much is in the cloud now? How much is going to the cloud? How much can go to the cloud from what you see at Equinix?
Sure. I think that's a really interesting question, Paul, and it's also a terribly important one for the insurance industry based on where the industry finds it today. It doesn't seem like really so very long ago that the cloud was kind of like alchemy, that it was something to treat with suspicion, treat with huge caution. And yet today, we see a situation where insurers globally are adopting cloud like never before. Now, part of the reason for that was driven by the pandemic, where within the space of a month, the global insurance industry had to turn itself from being one that was face-to-face, one that was very socially driven, very personally driven, to one that was entirely, at least from an interaction perspective, digitally driven. That's forced a lot of the shift to cloud. But in terms of what is actually being done with it today, we are seeing a lot of what I might call sort of office efficiency type stuff, sort of Microsoft 365, things like that. The use of Zoom, the use of Teams, the use of WebEx, the use of the collaboration tools. But at this stage, we're still not seeing the most use of cloud in terms of sort of line of business tools, absolute business critical tools. There still isn't that much exposure to it yet. And I think there are a variety of reasons for that, ranging from security concerns, ranging from issues concerning legacy systems. Insurers cannot afford to simply abandon their systems of record that have served them so well. This will have to be done over a long time. But also, it's a matter, I think, of people becoming familiar, truly familiar with the use of cloud, and then beginning to get themselves into a position where they right size what they're having to do. Some of it will be in the cloud. Some of it will remain on dedicated hardware. Some of it will go into a sort of intermittent state, often referred to as bare metal, where you can rent hardware from people and you can put anything you want on it, but that hardware is dedicated to you as opposed to necessarily being shared, as you find with the hyperscale cloud suppliers. But really, it's a constant progression. I think in terms, as I said, of office productivity, a lot of that is already there. This, of course, breeds familiarity with it. It breeds confidence in the whole system. And the next stage really will be to see how far the industry can progress into these line of business systems that actually do workloads that the industry depends on.
So as we had talked about this a little bit ahead of time, you would use that term bare metal. And for a second, I thought you were asking me to be a part of a band. You obviously haven't heard me sing, or yeah. But I'm curious about that, partly because of what we discussed about sort of the migration from old systems to new systems. I tell people that in a lot of ways I've been watching the same movie since 1986 when I was at the Wall Street Journal as a reporter and was assigned to cover the computer beat. So I've seen a number of transitions, first to sort of the PC era and then client server and on and on and on. And it seems that, for one thing, people underestimate the length of the tail. They think, oh, mainframes, they're done. And in fact, mainframes will be around forever. And they also tend, I think, to focus too much on getting the old systems right, rather than thinking, all right, I've got my valued customer James in front of me. Let me just figure out what works for him, get it right on the front end, and then have all these smart people sort of deal with the complexity on the back end. So that's more a statement than a question, but I guess I'm asking you to react to that sort of long tail idea, and the idea of getting the front end right as the key piece of this.
Sure. So I think off the bat, Paul, let's just agree one thing, particularly with any insurer dealing with the public, so business to consumer insurer, the customer experience is going to be the major battleground they're going to fight in. Okay, so number one, are they going to have to get the front end right? Absolutely, 100%, no question about it. So I think we can almost park that one to one side. It's got to be done. It's critical. No questions asked. But when we think about the rest of it, what we're seeing out in the market, and I would point out this really applies to any highly regulated industry. I often sometimes think of the retail banks sort of academically in similar terms to consumer insurers. But one thing that is certain is that the way they handle their infrastructure is altering. It is changing, and the cloud is driving a lot of this. But effectively, what we're beginning to see these days is the split of the whole thing into three very sort of distinct sections. The first is the core of the organization. The core is where the organization really does sit. It's where it requires the most access to whatever it needs access to, be it a cloud, be it a customer. It's, if you like, perhaps home office could almost be a description of where the core might be. Central functionality. Against that, we have this phrase, the digital edge. And the digital edge really is where everything is happening now. The digital edge is where most of the users sit. We've seen over the last 18 months with all the users being at home. That's the digital edge for them. It's where an insurer's customers exist. And if just you look at the likes of people like Lemonade, for example, what is their big thing? It's the fact that their customers can access them at any time of day from wherever they are. So there's this thing, the digital edge, which is really where data is created, it's where it's manipulated, and it's where it has to be stored to get decent customer experience to it. And then finally, we have, I think, between those things, ecosystems. There's been endless writing on platforms, IT platforms and so on. I'm sure you will see many of them. So I've even contributed to a few of them. But the whole idea of platforms and ecosystems is now a really big one. Insurance no longer operates in isolation. It has to operate in conjunction with a host of other services, be it payments people so that money can flow here and there and everywhere, be it specialist services, be it things like AI and machine learning, because often those things are done better by specialist companies out there who really deploy those sort of services and so on. And so we have this three-part model. Now, all of that has to be joined together. All of that has to have data flow between the three parts in an effective, efficient, and secure fashion. And let's remember that in terms of security, insurance is built on trust. So security is absolutely fundamental to it, regardless of any issues of hacking or bad actors. The very principle on which insurance is founded determines this. And so I think that that when we look at that with the sort of the way this is going, insurers are going to have to right size their operations to make sure that they fit this model. So the customer experience is largely going to exist at the edge, so that people can access it when they want to, wherever they want to. Certain other systems, I don't know, perhaps regulatory reporting systems, will sit in the core. Other types of reporting, other types of analytics may well also be there alongside them. And then within the ecosystem, there'll be accessing these best of breed services that are going to do, the current do a wide range of things already, but are going to really come to, in some ways, I think, dominate the service provision area, where they'll be picking off services, best of breed stuff here, there, and everywhere from within their ecosystem, and using that whole package to deliver a sticky, trusted, effective service out to their customers, and therefore look to maintain their customers and achieve success into the future.
So that makes an awful lot of sense. As you were talking about that, I was thinking back to the fact to the origin of the cloud, and sort of thinking of you with the three levels and describing it. I couldn't tell you how many diagrams I saw of computer architecture where there were PCs and there were servers and there were mini computers and there were mainframes. And then up at the top, there was this thing that just looked like a little cloud drawing that somebody had, which is sort of, that was where the magic happened. That was kind of, off premises and so forth. And as that actually developed, that cloud became the term that people used to describe this massive infrastructure that, among others, Equinix is helping build. If you were to draw that diagram sort of 10 years from now, you've laid it out very nicely in terms of those three layers, but if you were to give people a model to shoot for 5 or 10 years or whatever, as a planning horizon, what might that model look like?
Well, I think that the first thing to say is that the cloud bit, the fluffy nebulous, is going to be bigger. No question about that at all. It's going to do more. It's going to penetrate more deeply. It's going to expand the range of services that it can deliver out. The second thing to say is that and I think 10 years is an excellent timescale to look at. Will mainframes still be there? Yeah. Honestly, I believe they will. Now, I think we can say with some degree of confidence that by then they really will be small systems of record. They will only be doing a relatively limited part of the overall task. But will they still be there? Yes, they will. I think that what is also going to happen is we will see old mainframe physical technology declining, and they'll be passing the systems onto newer infrastructure that has been designed to ingest mainframe operation, so that you can get away from hardware, at least, that is extremely old, because that's probably where the biggest risk actually lies. So I think there are those two parts, but then I think the bit that we're really going to see the difference in is the piece where people come together and select and use services to a much greater degree. This whole concept of best of breed really is going to expand, I think, over that period of time. Now, that in many ways is a sort of maneuver away from what we're seeing today, a sort of expansion, if you like, of those sort of things. So I think there are a couple other things that we need to note about this. The first is that consumers of IT functionality are getting better at making sure that their systems are in the right place, run on the right type of hardware. They've begun to realize that there are certain things that are going to have to be sited very close to where they're used. What I think would be referred to as a distributed architecture. So, getting away from the idea that there is a central cloud or a central home office, that you have a sort of distributed network across your area of operations where you can get at relevant bits of it quickly, efficiently, securely. So I think there's going to be a huge expansion of that sort of distributed architecture. The second thing is that each section of the IT world, be it cloud, be it these sort of bare metal things we were discussing earlier, be it even mainframes, so they all have circumstances where they work better in a particular place. So what you'll find is they're going to need a bit of cloud, they're going to need a bit of whatever the sort of mainframe successor might be. So they'll have hardware that is not dedicated and hardware that is dedicated. Some of it may even be on premise. You hear people talking about things like data center on a pole nowadays. So that you will have mini data centers literally in streets. Because those are things that are going to be required to bring data to things like autonomous vehicles, which is going to drive a lot of this. And they really have got to be right there next to it. So this whole concept, therefore, I think, we have kind of a sort of a mantra about this. And what we would say is that you need to play